Hi and welcome to Accelerating Your Wealth. I'm your host Rebecca Robertson, and today we're going to be talking about LGBTQ and finances and the hidden challenges and how to take back control with your money. Hi and welcome to Accelerating Your Wealth with your host, myself, Rebecca Robertson. I'm an independent financial advisor and wealth coach. I'm the director of Evolution Financial Planning, who is also our sponsor for today's show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share and review this episode. With your help, we'll reach more people who can benefit from the show. Quick one before we get back to it. If these conversations are landing for you, we've made something to help you go deeper. It's a short quiz. You answer a few questions and it tells you where to focus, then builds you a playlist of every relevant episode so you're not hunting through the whole back catalogue. Investing, divorce, business, there are 9 areas to land in. The link's below. Okay, so let's just be frank. This is a subject that I don't personally know things about, but I have context around what I experience with clients. I am happily married to my husband, but I do feel that this is a really important subject to bring to sort of conversation because there are some real struggles around this. So I talk a lot around women, and if we take that a little bit further around income and career barriers, then when it comes to pay gaps and career limitations, those that are in the LGBTQ plus community, there is sort of some career gaps and pay gaps in relation to discrimination around that, which you'd think in this day and age wouldn't happen. But if it's happening to women in sort of the general context of all women, then why would that not go that little step further and have that an increased issue? So then there's therefore lower lifetime earnings and can reduce long-term savings and pension contributions. And some individuals feel unable to fully open at work, affecting potentially their progression. So for me personally, that's not my experience, as I'm not an LGBTQ plus person. But what I have experienced is from my clients who are, let's be honest, we don't talk about our sexual preferences, but I do have same-sex couples, and that's obviously quite normal. But what I find really interesting is how a male and female, regardless of background, etc., or a same-sex couple, they actually financially, I'm talking about finances here, take similar roles. And it was a really interesting conversation I had with a client just a few weeks ago. So she is a high earner in London, and her partner works more part-time around the children, not as far as away. So both females, and one being the main breadwinner. And the way she was talking to me was if I was talking to my husband. So sometimes it's not about sexual preferences or sexual, your actual orientation, whatever translation you have from that. It can be the roles that we take. And I mean that more from what we understand to be traditional roles. So for her, as the main breadwinner, she was talking like maybe my husband would, who's in an employed job with a high salary and more pressure. And she was describing, that struggle between wanting to be at home with the kids, but also the commitment of work, being far away from working far away from where the children live, because they live and she works, they're quite a big difference. And that struggle between being at home with the children at the same time, but wanting to earn money to provide for the family, which traditionally you would hear from a male saying, I want to provide for the family. So it's actually not about male role or female roles. It's about the roles that we take within the finances. But from other couples that I've come across that are same-sex couples, I've actually found that the equality piece is actually a lot better. And I've generally found that they listen to each other a lot better. But they can be very different in their approaches, especially with investing. So you'd often have one who is maybe more risk adverse, and the other who is willing to take that little bit more risk. So it's not necessarily anything to do with what traditionally we would understand as a male and female role, but actually there's elements that are pulled across into those relationships. So for me as a financial advisor, I have to remove all of those sort of expectations and understand the individual and the individual relationship and the makeup of those relationships, and not assume that one is, because they're a breadwinner, they're willing to take more risk, which is what you traditionally would assume in a male kind of environment. And actually, I found contrary to that as well, I've had females who have invested more, and the males more able to take less risk because they're that much more cautious, because they're the breadwinner and they want to be more safe and secure and protect their family. So I think we have to be very careful of those sort of gender sort of tendencies to put those onto anyone really. So coming back to LGBTQ finances, there's lower financial safety nets, so they're less likely to have family support potentially, or inheritance. That's quite a scary thought. There might be some who are actually having to sort of live outside of what their family deemed to be acceptable, and therefore there's less support for them, and there's the higher likelihood of financial independence at a younger age. So the cost of living, or the housing and cost of living, because they might be looking to be in a certain community. They might have to live in a certain area because it's safer for them to be in that area. So they might not have as much choice. There might be certain places, for example, in London, that they might need to sort of gravitate towards or avoid. And that might cost more. A greater risk of housing instability for some individuals. Sometimes with relationships that might change, they might change, it might be quite a confusing time, lots of ups and downs, so that can then cause additional financial cost. And for family planning matters, obviously there's IVF and fertility treatment, which costs an awful lot of money, adoption and surrogacy, which takes time, and finances, making sure the finances are all in order. And these can be significantly higher for heterosexual couples. Legal and financial complexity. So that estate planning is crucial to ensure assets go to where you intended. And if a lot of these couples sometimes aren't legally married, that can have real financial impact. And that applies for a male and female couple where they're not married as well. But I think sometimes maybe these conversations in either camps are not discussed. Therefore, it's a natural assumption that if you're not married but you live with the person, that everything's going to be okay and you'll get everything given to you. But unfortunately, if they was to pass away, that's not always the case. There is some more laws coming into play. Actually, there's a consultation happening, literally, that's been press released today as I speak, around more to do with domestic abuse, which can be male, female, whichever way round. Unfortunately, it does tend to happen more male to female, around protecting women and girls, and around those legal aspects, that if you're in a couple in a relationship, you're not married, that you actually have some enhanced, that are currently not in place, legal rights. So there might be some change around that coming, which I think will be really interesting. Legal recognition of relationships have improved. So that complexities has, I think there's a lot more understanding around it now. I think there's been some real, if you think about banks and, preferences when it comes to, your gender, for example, and understanding of relationships and complexity of relationships, I think that has massively improved. But I think there's still obviously work to be done. Important to have your wills and your trusts and your protection in place, which are the foundational basics. But I think it's in having those conversations around who's going to do what, looking at the roles that you're playing in the relationship and understanding, okay, if we're going to have children, like who's going to be, one of us going to go part-time, or is one of us going to be full-time? Regardless of your gender, the role that we play within that couple as a family needs to be discussed, and looking at jointly, as you come together jointly, looking at those finances and saying, okay, what protection do we need in place? If something happened to you, have you got sick pay in place? Have we got life cover in place? Are you financially reliant on that individual? If you're somebody that is not sure what to do with their finances, maybe you're working and you're not sure what to do with the bonuses you've got at work, or maybe you started a business and you've got profits and you're not sure what you should be doing to enable you to A, pay yourself more, or B, potentially retire earlier. Maybe you're somebody that's thinking about, do I overpay on the mortgage? You've received some inheritance. You've got lots of questions around your finances and what to do next. Then check out Evolution Financial Planning, who are regulated independent financial advisors and financial planners that can help you make some of those big decisions in life. The issues that come across any couple still apply, but I feel that there is it's just a little bit more complex in terms of how those discussions are approached, and more around possibly like the outside of that relationship, how that's viewed. So then if those things aren't being discussed, or if we've got more of a reason that there's a gap in pension provisions, you're not looking at your investments, you're having to spend out more because you're living in a certain area, or you haven't got family support, then you're going to have potentially, are you going to be on track for retirement, for example? Pension inequalities and historic discrimination can impact those longer term outcomes. So the real impact on the future of that individual is lower savings but higher costs, so reduced long-term wealth, delayed or reduced retirement options, so you might have to work for longer, for example, financial stress, which just adds to complexities, and lack of security, which is the last thing you want when you're sort of feeling that potentially you haven't got the support network around you. So they're real issues and real challenges that I think just need to be highlighted and discussed. So what can you do? What things can be done? Which is the same across the board, right? It's a heightened challenge. So understand your financial position, be clear on what you're spending, what you're not spending, what you're saving, what you're putting into pensions, and just be aware of that next first step. What's the process? What comes next? And it might be that you just sit down with your partner and you explain how you're feeling about your finances. It might be something as simple as that. It might be that you sit down and, like the client I described previously, where she has the conversation with her partner explaining about the pressure that she feels to work all these hours, to have this big job, and to provide for the family, when, it's sometimes you feel that you can't have those conversations. And when you then speak to a coach or a therapist, you're able to open up. So if you feel that you can't do that, then it's really important to find someone that you can talk to about it, that's going to give you constructive and understanding advice. Building financial independence. So I talk about women being financially independent, but I think that applies across the board. I think we all should be financially independent, regardless of your role or your position. And then when you're in a relationship, it's about each party being understanding of that. So if you have got one person who is taking maternity or paternity leave, and that's a longer term plan, that you're still putting into their pensions as a family unit, that you're looking after each other financially speaking, regardless of the makeup of the relationship. But then creating your own safety net. So if you do decide, actually, this isn't for me anymore, I want to change something, I want to move away, I don't want the relationship to continue anymore, that you have your own backup savings and you have that safety net. And if you have got a partner, this is male, female, whatever your gender, but if you are relying on somebody else for the long-term security, is actually you do need to start looking at how you can start to prioritise. How can you start investing yourself? How can you top up your pensions? What emergency savings you could have, so that you're not prioritising them and their career over your own financial security. And then when you're having these conversations, is that do you want to have children? What does that look like? What's the cost? And what would be, like I mentioned previously, who's going to take that time out? Who's going to change how things work? And I've got a lovely couple that I've been speaking to for many, many years. They're both teachers, one in a special needs school, one for a head teacher at a school, and they're a female couple, and they've actually adopted 2 young girls, and I've almost seen them grow up with them, which has been beautiful to see. And the process that they went through in terms of taking time out, they had the support of their employer, they was able to go to interviews, it was a lot of time, a lot of work, and they continue to look at the children are very much the centre of their lives, and the fact that they're both teachers, they're able to be flexible around when the children aren't, and now they're both at school, that they're able to be flexible around that. So they're in a great position, they can do that, but that's not the case for everybody. So it's looking at, as a couple, who would be in the right place to do that. And there might be phases. I've got another female couple who, one was like the breadwinner and she earned lots of money, and the other one was much quieter and not saving so much and just wasn't sort of earning as much, and that sort of reflected, I think, in her decision making and how powerful she felt in the decision making. And then after a couple of years it shifted, and the next time I spoke to them there was a real role reversal, and it swapped around the other way, and the other person was taking sort of a less of a role and taking some time out and not travelling so much and looking after the children more, whilst the other one sort of took her career path and it was her turn to sort of shine. That's where I feel that there's a lot more balance and equality, whereas what I sometimes see in some male and female couples is that there's a lot more black and white. There's less grey. So what things can be done next? I think the most important message here for anyone that's struggling with these these additional issues is to talk to those that are around you about how you're feeling about your finances. Talk to your partner about it. Ask the questions like, well, what have we got in place? What needs to be in place? Talk to them about maybe if it's your job that's worrying you and you need to take a day, maybe go down to one less day a week, what impact that would have on the finances. If you are thinking about children, when you would like that to happen, and then looking at your finances, what you're currently got in place, to aspire to sort of say, okay, well, if we want this to happen, we need to reach this milestone, we need to save this much in the next 12 months. And just being really understanding, those that are listening to this, that somebody that might be in this position, is understanding those what they might be going through and the questions and things that might be coming up for them. So financial planning should really reflect your life. It's not a template. It's not a one thing fits all. There's some sort of general templates, but there's not just one. There's like maybe 10 different versions, and it's a case of looking at that template and saying, is this suiting me and the way I am? So some action points is to review your current financial setup. Check you have a will and protection in place. Start or increase investing your money. Think about the long-term goals. Think about some of those milestones you want to achieve over the short and long term, and seek an advice. And if you find somebody that you trust, whether it's just sort of more personal advice or it's regulated advice, find somebody that you feel that you can talk to and be open about these conversations, and not feel that you're having to hide who you are, and not talk about what you're thinking and feeling and going through in an open way. So financial planning isn't about fitting into a traditional life path. It's about building that financial plan that reflects who you are and the life you want to create. So I hope you found that helpful. I hope that's sort of given you some food for thought. And if you are supporting somebody in the LGBTQ plus community, then please share this with them, and I hope they also find it helpful. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope to hear you listening to us on another show. Do comment, do like, all that stuff. It does make a big difference. When I get messages from people saying they really enjoyed this episode or that episode, it does spur me on. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much. Thank you for joining us today at Accelerating Your Wealth with your host, myself, Rebecca Robertson. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do subscribe and let us know in the comments any of your thoughts.